Welcome back to America's Fractured Politics. Anthony Flaccavento is joining me today. Anthony is the author of Building a Healthy Economy from the Bottom Up. He's published articles on sustainability and rural development in the Washington Post, the Huffington Post, and in other journals. He has founded the Appalachian Sustainable Development Program and now serves as the director of the Rural Urban Bridge Initiative. He's also an experienced organic farmer. Anthony, welcome. It's great to have you on. I want to start with a couple of questions about the initiative. Talk about the Rural Politics Project. What is it and what are your objectives? I think I can kind of guess, but I'd like to hear it from you.
So most of my adult life has been involved in rural development, kind of economic development, community development. And then in 2018, I decided to run for Congress in Virginia's 9th District. Used to be represented by a Democrat not that many years ago, but has now become, like a lot of rural America, overwhelmingly red. It's essentially one party rule to the U.S. House and Senate as well as to the state legislature. So after running a really good campaign as a farmer and a working guy and holding a little more than 100 town halls, actually in-person town hall meetings, against a really dull and absentee incumbent, I still got beaten 2-1. And so I started thinking, there's something going on here. I could have done a few things different, but you don't run a campaign like that and get beaten 2-1 unless people have fundamentally changed how they view the politics. So that led me to reading a bunch of stuff, reaching out to some of those authors, people like Erica Edelson, who's now the president of our board, Arlie Hochschild, who's written a lot of great books, including recently Stolen Pride about Eastern Kentucky, and Kathy Kramer, who wrote The Politics of Resentment. And I said, we need to figure this out, get together. And so we started Ruby. First as just a bunch of volunteers doing some things. And then in 2022, we actually formed as an organization. And Ruby, the Rural Urban Bridge Initiative, up to this point has been focused on trying to help the left, broadly defined, Democrats, liberals, progressives, understand how we got into this mess, why so many working class and rural people have either left the Democrats or moved to the right or some of both, and then what we can do about it. So that's essentially what we do. We help our colleagues on the left understand the root causes, which are primarily economic, but not exclusively, and then figure out better ways to, we call it think different, talk different, and act different. And so that's what the Rural Urban Bridge Initiative does. It helps people understand how to communicate differently, how to understand the issues and the problems and rural people differently, much more authentically, and then what we can do on the ground in terms of public policy, but also community engagement with our neighbors. That's who we are.
How is it going?
Well, it's going well in the sense, it's going very well in the sense that what we offer is in big demand on the left, oftentimes from Democrats, but sometimes from groups like Indivisible or Our Revolution or the Sierra Club or rural coalitions. And our trainings, which we've done now about 90 times, our basic understanding and overcoming the divide trainings, we've done in 20 different states, probably had about 6,000 participants at this point. Extremely well received. People say they just understand the issue and the problems and what to do in a whole new way. Our Rural New Deal, which is a policy platform, a very pragmatic but far-reaching policy platform, has gotten a pretty good amount of play. We've been embraced by two state parties. Ken Martin of the DNC thinks very highly of the Rural New Deal. Ro Khanna, the representative from the Silicon Valley, is a big champion of it. So at that level, what Ruby offers and the impact that we're having through our trainings, our education, our policy work, and our community works are on the ground. They're all in big demand, and people are very, very excited because it's really pretty unique in terms of what's out there. On the other hand, we clearly are not transforming the world into a place where everybody is treated fairly and justly, because we've got, at the national level at least, everything going pretty much in the wrong direction. So the way I see it is our work is critically important and it is making a difference, but it's just too small a difference to have changed national debate, national politics yet. We want it to get to that point.
Well, hopefully there are other people working on it.
There are. There are other groups like Rural Democracy Initiative, which does fantastic work all around the country. There's the things that people might not have heard of, like the Rural Climate Partnership. That's people working to find solutions to climate change, but also ways of discussing climate change in rural communities. There's some great regional and local groups all over the country. I'm familiar with some excellent ones in Virginia and North Carolina and Wisconsin and other places. So there's plenty of good work going on, and a lot of people who are at least broadly speaking trying to do the same thing we are. Maybe slightly different focus, but very similar. Basically 40 years since Reagan, we've had this trickle-down economic vision that is completely destructive to local communities. So bottom-up economics, which is the title of my book, is essentially the opposite of trickle-down. Trickle-down believes in freeing up the wealthiest, these kind of the investor class, freeing them up with low taxes, low regulatory burdens, because they are the drivers of the economy. They create the innovation that leads to new things. They create the jobs and the wealth that trickles down to the rest of us. Well, that's absolutely not happened for the most part, and certainly not in small towns and rural areas. Quite the opposite. I call it a suck-up economy that we've had. So what a bottom-up economy has, and this is not wishful thinking or theoretical, it's happening all over the country. A bottom-up economy is based on a couple of straightforward propositions. Number one, that the more diverse your economy is, the stronger you'll be. The more independent, small to mid-sized businesses, family farms, firms of all kinds, community banks, the more you have that diversity, the more stable your economy is, so that if a big corporation decides to send the jobs to China, it's going to have an impact, but a much smaller impact if your economy is made up of hundreds or thousands of small and mid-sized businesses. So one is it's that economic diversity really is critical to resilience. The second is that you actually get more innovation. Small businesses proportionately create many more patents than the giant tech companies, the giant ag companies, et cetera. We think of Google and Meta and all that, we think of them as the innovators, and of course they are in some respects. But if you look at it on a dollar basis, small businesses create far more innovation. Similarly, community banks, small, mid-sized community banks, invest $4 for every $1 that Wall Street banks invest in businesses and homes. So the big banks make money by playing around with money, by creating derivatives and all that faux wealth. Local banks, smallish banks, they still get their money for the most part the old-fashioned way, by investing in home ownership and businesses. And so just as you have small businesses creating more innovation through patents, you have small community banks and financial institutions investing far more in the community. And similarly, you get more bang for your buck with small to mid-sized family farmers who are actually more productive on a per acre basis and more likely to manage their land in a way that's good for the climate than with the mega farms, the CAFO farms. So that's the other part of bottom-up development, is it's simply better for everybody. It really is. Some studies have even shown that counties with more economic diversity, with more small independent businesses, they're healthier. Their citizens are actually physically healthier. They have higher rates of participation in civic and charitable organizations. They even have higher voting rates. So something about an economy that's full of enterprises that your own neighbors are operating just is good for the society as a whole. And that's what bottom-up economics is about.
What happens to the Democratic Party if they can't bridge this divide?
I think the Democratic Party will go down and possibly the country with it. We've seen in the response from many, not all, on the right to Charlie Kirk's murder that the other side, as it were, and I'm talking here about the leadership, the pundits, the people in the Trump administration, not the everyday voters who might have voted for Trump, but they see everything as an opportunity to increase their power. They see everything as a chance to get revenge on people that have wronged them, they think, and to consolidate their power. The Democratic Party, I've been saying for many years, has lots of flaws. We've made a lot of mistakes. But right now, the Democratic Party is really the only thing standing between us and a complete takeover. You want to call it autocracy, tyranny, whatever you want to call it, fascism. But for the Democratic Party, this is the little catch-22. For the Democratic Party to survive as a party and be relevant again, where its base stops shrinking and starts growing again, the Democratic Party has to do more than just talk about how bad Trump is. Every day since he was elected again, that's what most Democrats and liberals and left have been doing. Cataloging his abuses, cataloging the treachery, cataloging the corruption, all necessary. But what you don't hear is, what are we going to do different? What are we going to do to address the incredibly severe problems that farmers are having right now? What are we going to do to reverse the decline of manufacturing, which had started to rebound and now is going down, down, down? What are we going to do to help small businesses? How are we going to create an economy and a politics that actually works for the majority of Americans? Simply saying we've got to defend democracy against tyranny, it has galvanized our choir, but our choir is getting smaller, not bigger. And we have got to put forward a clear and compelling vision for how things can be different. We can't just say to people, we are preserving the system, when people think the system hasn't worked for them. We have to say, we're going to preserve democracy, but we're also going to build a system that actually allows you to lead a good life. I don't get it. I don't get it. Trump's numbers have gone down. They've backed up. They've gone down. They're sometimes been under 40%, sometimes a little over. They're not good. But Democrats, we ain't getting none of that. Democrats are stuck at somewhere around 27 or 28% approval rating. People who've sort of opened their eyes to the fact that Trump lied to them are now starting to turn against him, but they're not turning to us. And the missing piece is something that lets all of those folks know that once and for all, we're going to return to being the party of the working class across race, because it's Black, Hispanic, and white working class people who moved towards Trump, who moved away from the Democrats, across race. We've got to make it clear that we ain't going back. It's not just that we're not going back to a racist past, we're also not going back to the neoliberal trade deals. We're not going back to trickle-down economics. We're not going back to the relaxed view of corporate mergers and allowing big companies to get bigger. We're not going back to any of that. We're standing with workers. We're standing with farmers and small businesses. And then we need a clear platform, whether it's the Rural New Deal that Ruby and Progressive Democrats of America wrote or something else. We need to say, this is what we mean when we say we're committed to you. Our approach to that has been to take a very concerted effort to reach the new leadership of the DNC. You know, the DNC stands kind of separate in a way from Schumer and Jeffries and the elected officials, but obviously, if you can get the DNC to embrace what we're talking about, rebuilding the party from the bottom up, undertaking the kind of community engagement that we do in Community Works, putting forward a Rural New Deal, etc., If you can get the DNC to make this stand, which we're working on, then we got a much better chance of getting other Democrats from local party activists up to the top to do that. And we've made some progress. We've got a good relationship with Ken Martin. We've also working with a couple of the key, I forget what their positions are called, but essentially Ken is the chair. These are vice chairs, people like Shasti Conrad from Washington State and Jane Klebb from Nebraska. We're all sort of working towards this to, again, to get the DNC and the party to focus on rural and working class people, not to the exclusion of the needs and the people and the travesties going on in the cities, but just to say make this as central. And our main vehicle to do that has been a one-on-one direct relationship with Ken. We've had a number of meetings with him. He's very supportive of the Rural New Deal. He's very supportive of this idea of rebuilding the party from the bottom up, but he seems to be somewhat hamstrung. I don't know if it's by donors or just by kind of the establishment who wants to keep doing the same old, but we continue to push on that front. And then we've been very fortunate to have Ro Khanna being a leading advocate of both our Rural New Deal, but of this whole idea that the party has to prioritize working and rural people. I think it's partly rich, poor, or maybe it's wealthy, like it's not just the super rich, wealthy and working class and poor. I would nuance it a bit to say that, because an awful lot of the people who are aggrieved and feel aggrieved are not poor, but they're struggling. Their common feature is they're sort of hanging on by a thread, what the economists are calling precarity. You know, they might have a job now, they might be making ends meet, but they have minimal savings. They're not confident that they'll have their job in a week. Their kids' prospects don't look so good. That's economic precarity or insecurity. There's a ton of people who are not poor who are in that position. So I think it's the combination of the poor and the working folks in that situation. And that's working in the working class in the blue collar sense of construction and manufacturing jobs and farmers and plumbers, electricians, but it's also working class in terms of waiters and waitresses, service staff of all kinds. They're all kind of in the same economic situation. When you lay that over, I think it tracks pretty well with the urban-rural divide, but there are some distinctions because rural people, somewhat across class, also have a very strong connection to their place, to rural places, something that city and suburban people don't tend to have. So there's certain characteristics that go along with being in the countryside. That attachment to place is one. Another is just that we produce the vast majority of the stuff that the whole country needs to survive: the food, the fiber, the energy, the clean water, etc. And so that means that a working person or a poor person situation in rural is always going to be a little bit distinct and different from a colleague in the city who's working a factory job or working as a house cleaner. They've got a lot in common. They got some of the same grievances and some of the same needs, but they also have some differences in terms of what kind of policies are needed to make their lives better. I'll do a Ruby commercial because I really think we offer some opportunities, and then I'll talk beyond that. So Ruby does offer a couple of things that I think the average individual Democrat could definitely do. And when they do, they're usually pretty happy they did it. One is join the organization. It doesn't cost anything, just subscribe, and you'll learn about how you can start a Community Works chapter in your community. We started Community Works, which is where local Democrats form a Community Works chapter and do non-political work, fixing homes, picking up trash, hosting blood drives, distributing food in concert with their neighbors. And they do it 3 times a month, very regularly. And what we're finding in Community Works is that it really changes Democrats' understanding of their neighbors. A lot of times Democrats are kind of afraid of their neighbors. They think they're all MAGA maniacs. They think that they'll shoot them if they say the wrong word. And they learn about their neighbors that actually most of them are very decent, good people. And the same happens in reverse. These more conservative neighbors start to find out that actually Democrats are pretty decent people, and they're right here beside me helping make the community better. So that's one thing you can do. You can just attend one of our community work sessions, which you can learn about on our website. And we now have Community Works chapters in 6 states. So there's a lot of energy around that. A second thing they can do, talk to their local Democratic committee, their county committee, maybe a few county committees, or their state party about hosting a rural-urban divide training. That is just really a great way to just jumpstart your understanding of how we got into this mess and start to think of ideas about how to get out of it. I'd say those two are great first steps. The other one I'll say is that if you're a local Democrat who's been involved in some of the resistance campaign, going to protests, going to rallies, planning to participate in the No Kings rally, hats off to you. Great job. But we would invite you to also join the Beyond Resistance campaign, where you won't just be protesting the horrible things Trump is doing, but you'll be lifting up rural people, lifting up farmers, lifting up working class folks, what's happening to them, and how to make a difference for them. So joining the Beyond Resistance campaign is something that we hope literally millions of people will do. So that's another very big opportunity. And that's not just Ruby's thing. We've got 15 or 16 different organizations, from Public Citizen to the Center for Working Class Politics to Dirt Road Organizing and many others as partners in that campaign. Everything that I've mentioned is on the Ruby website. It's just www.ruralurbandbridge.org, ruralurbandbridge.org. That's all there is to it. And the guidebook is, once you get to our website, on the homepage, you'll see a resources page. And then if you go to that, you will see the guidebook. The guidebook is a collection of about 2.5 or 3 dozen shortish essays that really give you a foundation into the underlying causes of the divide. That's the main focus of the guidebook, is building the understanding. But also the final section has some hints at what you can do about it. It's kind of like a parallel to our rural-urban divide training, but you can just read that on your own time, and then you can decide if you want to do a training as well. The Rural New Deal is also on the website, and several other really good resources. I'll only say that it's, all of us at Ruby, staff and board, get just how disturbing and frightening this time that we're living through is. I mean, Trump has sort of met and exceeded our worst nightmares. I think what we have to do is fight back, but I think that fighting back has to be fighting for a new system, not just defending the existing system. I'm in no way in favor of all the harm and the destruction, the elimination of so many different agencies, hundreds of thousands of federal jobs. I think that's all terrible. But again, if we only talk about stopping the bad stuff and defending the system, we're not going to broaden our choir and get people who feel that the system betrayed them, and they're basically right. So I would say keep your spirits up, but also look at how we can actually begin to build a much better system and get a much broader base in the process.
Thanks for joining us today, Anthony. This has been incredibly informative, and I think our listeners will find it so as well. Folks, join into the project, communicate with others, make sure that you talk to people and make sure that they understand that what we have in common is far more than what divides us. And this project can help us tremendously. So I want to thank you very much. And that's a wrap for America's Fractured Politics. We'll see you next week.